Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ladies' Night Party of Improvable Cause. We are here just to chat with you and hang out with you and have some fun with you while we're all separately isolated. So we're going to get started with a few questions and introductions. I'm going to have everybody go through and introduce themselves and tell us about how we got started in comedy and improv and how they got connected with Improvable Cause. So Becca, you've got the most storied, wild past from many states.
Sure. My name is Becca Timmons. I'm born and raised in Pensacola, but I first started improv after I'd finished school. So I was a late bloomer, so to speak. So I started improv when I was about 26. And I took a victory lap after school. I took a year off, and I went out to LA and studied at the IO West Improv Olympic, formerly known as the Improv Olympic, and fell in love with it and came back to New Orleans and performed with the troupe there at the New Movement Theater. And then finally, when I moved back to Pensacola, I had to find a way to keep up my improv chops and try to find a group to just jam with or perform with. I wasn't really expecting to be welcomed in with open arms to a troupe like these guys did. So I went to a workshop. I was like, yeah, you guys seem cool. Just jam and just, let's just get some reps in. And then the chemistry, which is so stupid, but it was fucking real. So, and that was 6 months ago. And it's been an absolute blast. So I love these women. I love our whole troupe. And they're one of the most, and I've done a lot of improv. I've done a lot of shitty improv, a lot of good improv. And this is by far the most supportive, intelligent, top of intelligence troupe I've ever played with. And I'm not just blowing smoke. Like, they're awesome.
Boy. Okay.
Brookie.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh, how do I follow that? I'm Brooke. I've been involved in Improvable Cause since before we were a troupe. So I started going to workshops back in 2004. So I was 18 and kept going to workshops. And eventually we were the same people going to all the workshops and decided to start performing as a group. And that's really where I got my start. And I've been doing it ever since. And that's been a long time. So I don't have as much to say, but everything I've learned about improv has been like on the job while we were learning how to do it together. So it's been great.
I think it's me next because of alphabetical order. I started watching 30 Rock and I fell in love with Tina Fey. And I decided to listen to her audiobook, Bossy Pants. And she talked a lot about improv. And I remember being like, oh yeah, I watched Whose Line Is It Anyway as a child. And so I Googled improv troops Pensacola and Improvable Cause popped up in the Google search results, I know. And I went to a few shows and thought they were amazing. It turns out they were. Like, I kind of had the best introduction into improv because I've seen, not to toot our own horn, but I've seen other improv troupes and they're okay. But there are of course some highly professional ones that have blown my mind, but for a local Pensacola, Florida group, Improvable Cause really just blew my mind. And so they decided to, or they announced a workshop at one of the shows I was at, and I went the next day. And after the workshop, Debbie, you asked me to stay, and that was a little more than 5 years ago. So I was at the time 28, almost 29. I'm 34 now. So yeah, I kind of got a late start too. Not just in improv, but like in friends. I feel like I didn't even make friends till I was in my late 20s. So here we are.
Christina's so sweet. She says, Debbie asked me to stay. I was like, you leave and I will cut you.
We're all messaging like, who is that girl?
True. I'm Debbie Dunkerley, and I've been doing improv since I was 20. So I am coming up on my 26th year in around the July 4th weekend. And I'm so tired. I got involved. I always performed with mostly guys, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I was the only female in a couple of different troupes I was in. And this is the first troupe where we were ladies heavy, lots of ladies, more than 50%, which was kind of cool. It was very different from what I had done before. And I got with IC shortly after Brooke, I guess, did, because I remember going and seeing her and just thinking that she was so funny and so bizarre. And I had no idea how old she was or what she did or anything about her, but I was like, she's just hysterical. And then we've been doing IC for over, 14 and a half years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, still here.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's me. So my background is I have always been a theater kid. I've done theater from like a young age, but when I was about 15, I started performing in Lab Rats, which is Debi's teen improv troupe, basically, that she started, and she taught us the fundamentals of mostly short form improv, very similar to what we do in an Improbable Cause show. So I was in Lab Rats' troupe for a couple semesters, and then without going too much into it, my family fell on hard times financially, and we had to cut a lot of extracurricular stuff we were doing, like, unfortunately, Lab Rats. But for a few years, I was working in this community theater out in South Alabama. Because I was unable to do Lab Rats, I decided I was going to start my own little improv troupe similar to that and try to pass on what I know. So I started teaching improv for a semester. I think it was called, like, Random Acts of Improv. I don't know. It was, like, almost 10 years ago now. But so I acted for a few semesters, and then I tried to pass on what I knew to the best that I could. And then I stopped doing that for a couple years. And then in my freshman year of college, I happened to see, it was like an Improbable Cause show at like a con that's not even around anymore, like a Comic-Con. And I ran into Debi again, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I was a Lab Rat a few years back. This is really cool. I'd love to get involved again. And she welcomed me back in. It was just sheer luck. And I rehearsed with them. That I was 18, so that was 6 years ago now, because I'm going to be 25 this summer. So 6-7 years by now I've been with Improbable Cause.
Not many people make Cthulhu and Caligula references when they're teenagers, but that was Kay. Sorry, go.
I think my first introduction to the troupe was similar, like through that convention that no longer exists here. And long story short, Debi kind of scalped me from another troupe that was like trying to get started, like trying and failing to gain traction. And Debi and Bill, and I think Jay came and did a workshop with the people who were like supposed to be in that troupe. And I did something really stupid. And yeah, I was like, I'll just be a moose. I don't know what else to do. I have no idea what's going on right now. Like, I'm just going to go out and be a moose and we'll see how it goes. And they were like, that's how improv works. You should be in our troupe. So yeah, and that was in like 2013, I think. So I've been active since then. And I've never done any improv or theater before, really. Always been a real nerd about it. Really love watching it and engaging with it when I could, but this has been my first real experience, and I just haven't quit. I can't quit you.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's me then. Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie. I have a very similar experience to Kay. I was in Lab Rats when I was probably 15, 16, I don't know. A high school boyfriend brought me to Lab Rats. And as unfortunate as that is, it at least brought me to improv. So yeah, I started off in Lab Rats and did that for a couple of semesters. And then I think actually Bill and Debi asked me when I turned 18 to come to IC rehearsals, but I was too chicken shit to go. So I waited only a few, like another semester or two, and then I fully started rehearsing with improv when I was 18, 19 years old, something like that. And I've been doing it ever since, kind of off and on, between like school and different things going on. But I've been probably at it for the longest period of time, which is probably about like 5 years now, like full stop, like full on. So yeah, it's been lots of fun. Again, like I didn't really have many friends, but now I found like my best friends.
No.
That was a weird sound I heard.
So I think I know it's hard to be serious. The next kind of thing we wanted to talk about was ask everybody what their comedic influences are, whether they're people or, you know, something you were interested in when you were younger or whatever you might interpret that as. I think you're up first, Becca.
I think I grew up watching Saturday Night Live and Whose Line Is It Anyway? But I think like Christina, it was really Tina Fey and Amy Poehler that was like, oh wow, women are not only funny, they are absolutely hilarious, and that women can be funny and are funny. And then I have also watched a lot of 30 Rock, and I think now more than ever, I'm a huge Kate McKinnon fan. I think she's done a lot for our gender in comedy, especially for improv. So she's probably one of the more influential improvisers out there. Her and probably Kristen Wiig are probably my favorite. Yeah.
Sorry.
Brooke, do you want to answer your own question?
Oh yeah, I can't contain my excitement. A lot of my introduction to comedy, and I didn't know that it, like, you know, as a child, you don't know how it happens. You just know it's funny stuff. I started watching SNL, excuse me, as a kid. Probably like the first thing I remember is like Mike Myers doing Linda Richman's Coffee Talk. And that was probably like 1993 or 4. And my uncle, he used to do an imitation of Linda Richman, like of of Linda Richman or whatever. And then I started doing one, and people start laughing at me, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." So that was like a childhood thing I was asked to do for years and years afterwards. And so I got kind of into SNL. My mom got me. I had a postcard with Linda Richman, like on my bedroom wall. And so that was kind of where I kind of got a lot of my comedic influence from, was just watching the sketches on SNL, not knowing that improv plays a big part in that, and that most, like all of those people have improv training. And as I got older, you know, Molly Shannon, of course, Kristen Wiig, Sherry O'Terry, Anna Gasteyer, Maya Rudolph, like that era of SNL was like, I was in like high school and I was like, oh my gosh. That's what I really looked up to. On the flip side of that, I have a lot of like physical comedians that I look up to as well, like Lucille Ball. I'm a big Betty Hutton. It's musical. It's like musical theater kind of stuff, but that also really influences what I do. Oh my gosh, what's her name from England?
Tracy Ullman.
Tracy Ullman.
Yeah.
Tracy Ullman was a big influence. So just kind of those people that have really, really strong characters and a lot of physicality. So that's kind of, those have been my comedic influences. Long answer.
Christine?
Yeah, same to all of those. One of my earliest comedic influences was definitely Lucille Ball. I don't think I appreciated as a child just how revolutionary it was to be so slapstick in the 1950s I mean, she was 40 years old when the first episode aired. So she was literally she was in her 40s while this entire show is going on. She was also, I think, the second person to ever be pregnant on TV. It was a huge scandal and they fought for it. And she was, you know, and I don't know, I didn't appreciate that all. And then growing up, I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. So I don't know, in a lot of ways, I feel really lucky as a kid, not realizing how hard she probably had it, because it was just so like, well, yeah, that's what women do. That's what women on TV do. They're funny. Carol Burnett was really funny.
Oh, I love Carol Burnett.
Yeah. And then, I grew up watching Whose Line and SNL. And then there are just so many, I mean, I feel really lucky also that like the older I get, the more female comedians I see everywhere, both stand-up and improv. And I'm just impressed by everybody constantly. So, and I feel like I'm still really learning all the time. Any female comedian I watch, or male comedian for that matter, but since we're watching or doing what we are doing right now. Yeah, any female comedian I watch, I am taking notes and constantly learning from them.
These kids just don't remember the wonderfulness of Abbott and Costello. I grew up, like the earliest comedy stuff that I remember watching really was black and white Three Stooges. And we watched all the everything Monty Python. I memorized all of it. Kids in the Hall, I was a huge fan. Kevin McDonald, I'm still in love with. And I would say, and I used to sneak out of bed and watch Eddie Murphy until I memorized all of Delirious, which is very naughty for an elementary school child to watch. But I remember the first time I saw Ellen DeGeneres, and I laughed so hard. And it was an old stand-up. I probably wouldn't be able to find it today, but it was just so incredible. And I thought she was so funny and so good. And it was a whole different style. I always loved and watched slapstick. And then I really loved the inappropriate, really poking at social taboos, George Carlin and all of that. And Ellen was the first one I saw that just took these very simple things in life and made them delightful and funny and wonderful. So, and I like all the people in today too.
Mine are kind of similar to, I would say Debbie, starting out like as a little kid, Monty Python and the Three Stooges. Yeah, I think one of the biggest influences when I first started being like, wait, I like light comedy was I love Mel Brooks movies. But specifically, I love Madeline Kahn. She's one of my favorite comedic actresses of all time, and she's gorgeous. I had the biggest crush on her, but she's so funny. Her delivery and comedic timing are impeccable. She can even do physical comedy. All her characterizations wonderful. So I loved Madeline Kahn and Mel Brooks's writing. And then as I got older, like everybody's saying SNL, like all the ladies we named, in addition to nowadays, like also Vanessa Bayer, I think, and Adie Bryant. I think that's
Yeah.
SNL, Who's Line, Kids in the Hall. So all the women that were previously named, I'm not going to go down through the whole list again because I don't want to be repetitive. All of those were very influential to me. 30 Rock, really changed my perspective on SNL, actually, watching 30 Rock. And I would say in terms of newer comedy, while these aren't women, I love Tim and Eric, and I think You Should Leave. Who's that? Tim Robinson's also fantastic. But I like the platform that especially Tim Robinson on his show has given to, I shouldn't say a man given a platform. I should say I like a lot of the talent that I've seen on there, like Patty Harrison as a comedic actress that I discovered through I Think You Should Leave. And she's on Shrill with Adie Bryant. And she's so freaking hilarious. So, I don't want to be repetitive and go through too much, but that's a quick rundown of the comedy I like.
We're all fangirling.
It's true.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything everyone has said, like pretty much every person that's been mentioned, I'm sure you can see me be like, yeah, them. I think Catherine Tate is hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
I love any comedian that just makes kind of what Debbie said about Ellen, like makes observations about the relatable things about being alive, because I think life is just hysterical and interesting and ridiculous, and the fact that we get to be alive and on this planet and like doing this weird thing together where we like exist. I think that's amazing. So Hannah Gadsby, I loved her Netflix special, Nanette. I've raved about that before. I think it was brilliant. Kate McKinnon, to just double tap on Becca's observation. She is fucking genius. Sorry.
Okay, so some of the people that haven't been mentioned, I thoroughly, even though she's not a typical what you think of a comedian, but Nora Ephron, I think is really a very a foundational kind of for writing and thinking about relationships, and kind of just of her time was really interesting. And then kind of going along with that, not something that you typically think of as a comedian, but I have thoroughly enjoyed and have found a lot of really great humor in, is Carrie Fisher. And I didn't really read any of Carrie Fisher's stuff until she passed, and now I'm reading all of her work, and oh my God, it's just all so funny and heartbreaking, and so it's at the same time like no bullshit kind of talk, but then there's so much bullshit that she talks, and I think it's a really I can identify a lot with some of that. So those are probably some of the ones that haven't been mentioned yet that I have found really influential.
I want to throw in a PS for Gilda Radner and her childlike play that I love when Brooke goes off, when someone gets behind Brooke and winds her up and she goes off in that way. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And it's just like the joy of being a 5-year-old in that ecstasy moment of, you know, being a little kid. And Brooke, a lot of times, just when she's just revved up, does that, and I love it.
I am a kid stuck in an adult's body forever. So.
Currently, Astronomy Club is kind of blowing my mind. They're pretty great. Yeah. Isn't that their name?
Also, we'll have to say, like, Tiffany Haddish is being such a great one too. Ali Wong also as like a mom. I fucking love Ali Wong's stand up.
Yeah, Baby Cobra. What was it?
Baby Cobra. Yeah, Baby Cobra.
That was good. It's good.
So we've talked about all of these women in comedy, which kind of segues us perfectly into Christopher Hitchens, who wrote an essay, I think it was in 2008 or a little more than a decade ago. It was called like Why Women Aren't Funny, I believe. And as women or femme people in our improv troupe, we've actually done a couple panels at the women's conference. Maggie, can you say what the name is?
Women's Studies Conference.
Women's Studies Conference at UWF. I feel like a bad woman, like I don't know the name of the Anyway.
You're up to
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up doing a panel discussing his essay where he basically claims that women aren't funny because women don't need to be funny because we're pretty, and the purpose of humor is to attract a mate, and since we're already pretty, we don't need to be funny. And he basically said that the only women who are funny are either overweight, butch, or Jewish, or some combination of all three. And he basically, in a very like backhanded compliment kind of way, said that women's greatest honor is pregnancy and childbirth, and so we don't need to worry about humor at all.
Becca's first time hearing this, like.
Yeah, so it's just interesting because a lot of us did mention all of these women that we are influenced by. I don't know, discuss.
Not like apparent to all of you.
A man.
Get out of here, Kyle.
No. You can't push me out. I'm a man.
Oppress him. Oppress him.
Okay. Anyway, so discuss women in comedy.
So funny. Like, what's so funny about, you know, those observations that he had about like why women don't need to be funny, and like things as sacred as giving birth and menstruating and you know, being the vessel of life. There's nothing funny about any of those things, and I just think that is absolute horse shit, because it just rules out the experiences of over half the population, where it's like pretty funny stuff about walking around in this body.
This is some kind of like conservative like women.
He was like an atheist philosopher, but also really right wing, like. Yeah.
Like make me a sandwich kind of thing. Like
you should go read the essay he wrote for Vanity Fair forever.
Yes.
Yeah, go read your quarantine. Go read the essay.
Yeah,
You'll love it.
I read the entire essay.
Oh God, my cat was trying to get in on this.
I think it's like, so women obviously our experiences as women. I mean, you know. in terms of like menstruation and pregnancy, that's pretty universal with most women. Obviously they're trans women, but like also in the ways that everybody's similar, like there's comedy and silly experiences like that, but also my life is not all that different from men. So I have on one side the parts that are relatable as a woman that are funny, but also I'm a gross weirdo that like burps and farts and gets drunk and tussles, and like I'm not in a ivory tower. I experience life the way most people of all genders experience life. So I think it's also just bizarre that he wouldn't think that we as women have access to most general human experiences that can be made fun of, as well as being women and having that take on it.
Right, like we're accessory to men's lives. And yeah.
I love reading Christopher Hitchens, but for a lot of reasons, and I don't agree with him on everything, but I always enjoy hearing his point of view, even when I disagree with it, which is about half the time. I would say this because, you know, Bill and I discussed this because he likes Christopher Hitchens as well, is no one is born funny. It's a skill that you develop and you work on and you study, much like juggling. So if everyone were just to pick up pins and try to start juggling, then they're not all going to get 3 pins in the air. But I think Hitchens' point was boys try to juggle a lot in order to get girls statistically. And so they work on that skill a lot. But, you know, as well as peacocking around statistically. But I think that everyone's an individual, and no matter how you feel about comedy or wanting to make people laugh or, you know, what that means to you. It was a really big deal to me always from childhood on to make people laugh. It was the most wonderful, joyous, beautiful feeling that I could get, is to make people laugh from childhood. So comedy was always a big deal to me, and making people laugh was always a big deal to me. Some people couldn't care less. So I think when we look at people as individuals and how much do they care about making people laugh, then that's going to find the people that are really good at comedy, because they care and they apply themselves and they do it. And they like to violate social norms, social taboos. Like me.
I think we're on to the next, I think we've exhausted that point.
I think you're right.
I think
You
it's
threw a wet blanket on everything again.
It wasn't a wet blanket. It was a nice little round.
It was good, like round, like it's cool. I'm drunk. I'm cool. I'm chill.
I'm a cool mom. Speaking of cool moms.
So I think it was, are we on to our next point?
Oh yeah, so we're a bunch of ladies in a troupe. I know,
Which isn't common.
Which isn't common, yeah, just from observing like some of the, you know, inspiring comedic things that we've mentioned. There's a lot of men in those troupes. And then this troupe, Improbable Cause, has also been pretty male dominant in some you know iterations, but now it's a lot of ladies. So I know I can speak for myself that I have synced up my cycle with some of you over the time. Can anyone else
Yes.
to that?
Yeah.
Always on the rag. Actually, Bill and I are in sync.
Aw. Okay.
We're all simultaneously bleeding right now.
I think it's kind of interesting to kind of piggyback off of that is also the fact that the troupe was started by women.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Nicole Dickson, and then Debi took over. And then, you know, that's you kind of co-direct with Bill now. But having been there since the beginning, it's been interesting to see its various iterations. It usually was about 50-50. There was a period of time when it was like me, and if I'm not counting you as the director, Debi, like me and one other woman, female, two maybe. And then I was like, I want more women in the troupe. Sorry, my throat closed up as I was saying that. It came out way creepier than I wanted it to. So sorry. I turned into
Brooke had to get the chloroform and go get the ladies.
But God, Debbie. Someone cut her off. So anyway, yeah, that's done. I'm done with my point now.
And we did. We got more ladies in. But I don't know that it was, we really didn't go out and grab them. They kind of showed up here and there.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think for myself, seeing other women and femme people kind of like having a space and having permission to be the absurd person that I am on the inside, because I grew up in a place where I'm really not like the majority of people who live there. This type of thing is like not a thing that happens there or would happen there. So just like seeing other women, like seeing Debbie host a show and just be absolutely ridiculous, and then seeing Brooke perform, and then right when I joined the troupe was like right when Maggie first started performing, and I was like, oh my God, these people are brilliant. Like I could be like one of these people. And so then I think just continuing to just kind of say, screw it, and I'm going to go for it. And not just be like, the girlfriend in every scene, which is something that happens, right? When there's just like one femme person in a troupe, it's like you're the default, like, I guess I'm the like normal one in this scene while this guy is this kooky character. Or so it's been really cool to see that develop in the time that I've been in the troupe, to just see myself have more and more permission to be more and more absurd, and feel, Becca sort of said this early on, like feel so supported and so just like cheered on as that happens, because that doesn't happen in a whole lot of spaces. In a lot of settings, I'm too loud and I'm too opinionated and I have too many thoughts that are uncomfortable for people, and I do things that are weird.
I don't know what that's like at all.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think, I was literally just talking to somebody else about this the other day, that like until I joined this troupe, there were so many places and relationships in my life that did not allow me to be who I was, which is a very silly person. There were a lot of, literally like romantic relationships where people I dated were like, what are you doing? That's weird. Or like friendships that were like, I don't want to do this right now. And I'm like, but I'm a silly person. Like that's how I express myself. And then finding this group of people with a bunch of women who are super funny and super silly and get to have like really raw conversations with each other was so freeing. One thing I didn't mention, like a lot of my comedic influences are also in this group chat right now, or they're literally people that I watched and emulated and kind of felt like I could unfold around. So thank you all.
I think this group has been one of the best things in my life, and definitely the support of all these wonderful femme people in it. I was a very awkward kid growing up, and I had friends in high school, but definitely when I was in college, I didn't have a strong group of female friends. And until like a year ago, I struggled really badly with mental health issues, and there were so many times where I just kind of wanted to leave or withdraw, but the fact that there were these amazing like female friends here, like I hadn't had that for most of my life, like supportive women helping each other. We, like you said, we have these raw conversations and talk openly about issues that were universal to us, but also be supportive. I feel like in many ways this group has saved me, and I don't know, without the support of all these wonderful women and having that network, I wouldn't be who I am today, and I would be a much sadder person. I'm holding a LaCroix. There we go.
Becca, can you speak to your experience with other troupes and as opposed to this troupe?
Yeah. The troupes I played with in New Orleans and out in LA, they were a pretty good mix of men and women. I will say that there are some troupes, all women troupes that I have seen, where one of them might be, we're an improv troupe. We also happen to be 7 women. And then there's also like the women improv troupe where like every scene is like getting a pap smear or something, and it's like women, improv, women. I'm just like, okay, all right, that's cool, I guess. But I kind of like how we don't use or perceive our gender as something to silo us or keep us narrow, that we can be weird, gross characters and kind of operate outside of the confines of we're women comedians. Like, no, we're gross, and we're gonna do an entire scene about poop, and it's gonna be awesome.
Everybody poops.
Everybody poops.
We had a 20-minute long form in a rehearsal recently that was all about poop ballet.
Yes.
And it was so good.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Amazing.
And I think it was all women.
I'll never look at it the same way.
It was all women that day.
Yeah,
And
I
it was
remember that one now.
totally rad. Yeah.
Welcome back. We might have gotten disconnected briefly, and we might be in a different order on the screen now, and now there's a baby in the video. Sometimes life is like that. We're improvisers. We do what we do. So a good place to sort of wrap up this talk and, end on a nice note. We're doing this Swan Day virtual event now because we are all, as a community, practicing social distancing, keeping our space, and really trying to do our best to slow down the spread of COVID-19. And a lot of what's happening right now can make the world seem really scary. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of change in routine and structure, and things that are making a lot of people really uncomfortable and scared. And so we wanted to take a minute to talk about the role of humor and comedy and laughter in healing and in being okay when things are not okay around you. So whoever wants to start.
So I think, I don't know if anyone else remembers the very first episode of SNL after 9/11, where Rudy Giuliani came on, and he basically said, it's okay to laugh now. It's a good way to heal. It's a good way to cope. It's healthy. It's a healthy outlet. So even now, when something extremely heavy is going on and people are under physical and health and financial stress, that humor's okay, and it can actually be therapeutic.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've been seeing this meme going around that's basically something along the lines of like, don't mistake my humor in a time like this for my disregard for how serious everything it is. And that's kind of how I feel too. I don't know. I don't have the best coping mechanisms, and sometimes humor helps me not fall into those worst coping mechanisms. So I think humor can be very healing. I do think it can be a great way to kind of process a lot of change, uncontrollable change that's happening very rapidly, especially as comedians. One thing we do have some control over is the jokes we can make. And so if that's some of the control I can feel at the moment, then making a joke or posting a silly video sometimes helps things feel a little less daunting. I'm still freaking out a lot on the inside, but yes, Monroe, I am. I'm freaking out. I am freaking out, quite a bit. But I don't know. Yeah, everybody sharing memes or silly videos has kind of been funny, and I know there's like a difficult line to walk with hurtful and funny. There are people out there that are seriously affected by what's happening right now, and I think it always goes back to not poking fun at people who are in serious pain, but just poking fun at the larger shared situation. And that's what I do see a lot of people doing right now, and it's kind of cool. I don't know. I like it.
Your stuff, Christina, has been really good.
good content.
FYI.
Really good.
I feel like, when I was growing up, like a preteen, young teenager, one of my favorite movies was Dr. Strangelove, which, if you're not familiar with that movie, is a movie about like an impending nuclear apocalypse, like the planes have already been launched, and it's a movie about the end of the world, but it's like very grim and very funny. And while I don't think we're in necessarily an apocalypse, we're definitely in a huge sea change right now, and it is very devastating for most of the world right now. It's affecting everybody's life right now. And I've always used humor as a coping mechanism for trauma, and I think it would just kill me if I couldn't find like laughter, even if it's just like, this is so fucking grim. It's unthinkably ridiculous that this is even happening, and sometimes you just have to like laugh at the inanity of what's going on and like how hard it's hitting you. I feel like sometimes laughter is a response to fear washing over you. This sounds like I'm just quoting Dune or something. I wish I could articulate my thoughts better, but yeah, I think it's a reaction to absurdity sometimes, and tragedy has a level of absurdity in that you just can't process it necessarily. So I have to joke about it, but like, yeah, Christina has been saying, you got to think about who is being affected by the jokes. I'm also worried because my little sister is Chinese, and this virus has become racialized a lot. So I've been seeing racist humor and anti-Chinese humor revolving around that, and I think stuff like that is extremely harmful. So we need to, whatever jokes we make about it, we need to be conscientious of those who are being affected and are most vulnerable. I feel like I just yeah.
No, I really like that point being made, because we say as a troupe, as we're rehearsing and as we're kind of figuring out our style and our voice as a comedy troupe, because it's not about any single one of us, it's about our voice as a whole and the culture we create as a whole and as a group. And so we talk a lot about playing to the top of our intelligence, playing to the top of our audience's intelligence. So like never assuming that like we have to talk down to people for them to laugh. And then punching up versus punching down. And so that's really like, when there is something really screwed up happening in the world and we want to find some humor and levity in it, what are the things that we can punch up at? Like, what are the systemic oppressors that we can, poke fun at and make jokes at, and then, remind each other that we're all in this together. Yeah.
I'm just gonna make a bunch of baby jokes at Monroe.
Yeah. And I think humor is one of the things that connects people. Feelings are the things that connect people. And when we're all hurting, and when we all need a little bit of joy and levity and relief from the news cycle, and I frequently need a lot of relief from my own thoughts about tragedies bigger than things that I can handle. I work in mental health, and I find myself a lot wanting to be everything for everybody, and solve all of the problems. And so stepping outside of that and taking a moment to be with the people that I love is part of how I fill my own cup. Like, it's part of caring for myself, is to take moments like doing this. I mean, hey, you guys, you want to like teleconference and record it for people? Why not? This is the future.
Yeah.
I know we talked about humor a while ago. We had some conversations about humor being this buildup of tension,
Yes.
and then a release. And we don't even have to build up the tension right now. It's kind of done for us.
Everybody needs a release.
Yeah. And several years ago, I had a messed up diagnosis. A nurse told me something inaccurate, and I spent the entire weekend thinking that I had a condition that had a 90% mortality rate. And I was freaking out. And Bill was like, look, you've got to get a hold of yourself. You can either have a really terrible weekend and feel terrible and think about this, and then Monday is going to come and you're going to find out what's going on. Or, you can pick one. The only thing you can control is yourself. And there have been a lot of times that I've been stressed that I have thought of that. It's the only thing I can control is myself and my attitude and how I am, and how, work on how I feel about things. So I think humor helps us all do that, helps us all feel a little better, no matter what the tension has created.
I want to know what Maggie and Monroe think about all this.
Yeah.
I know as a mom, I can't, as much as my mind would love to be bogged down in, and get sunk down deep into the despair of this. this little funny, I'm not that even that as funny as Monroe, so he keeps things light. I'm gonna toss my laptop off the I don't even know what we're doing right now, Monroe. He is very much a busy baby. He's a boss baby. He's doing all the things right now, and I don't even know.
He's like a
He's
cat with your laptop.
teleworking. I mean, he's probably getting about as much done as the rest of us, to be perfectly honest.
Quarantine.
That's how my face is interacted with that.
Are you checking your phone now too? Do you have too many messages coming in?
Any other thoughts about that? The healing powers and connecting powers of humor and laughter and comedy?
Seek it out. Seek out laughter. Seek out fun. Seek out joy. Don't curl up in a ball. That
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Shit's bad enough. Gotta find something to make it a little less heavy.
Some levity.
Yeah, if you can, take a break from the news cycle because, again, while making jokes about this does help for a while, at a certain point, sometimes I find myself becoming too cynical. So it's good to take a step back. I literally, like, all weekend, my partner and I have been, like, laughing at videos of seals farting. Like, sometimes
It's the best.
I can't, it's so funny, but I can't, like, let it occupy my mind. Like, if it's possible to take a break and find humor and other things, and escapism, that's okay, and I think is healthy to an extent.
If you've never seen seals farting, it is
I have
the
never
best.
seen this.
They
Look, there's a
bounce. They're
video. It's like a seal crawling up on the beach, making direct eye contact with the cameraman. Just it's good. I keep watching it.
It's so good.
Wow. I think that's a good ending point.
Seal fart. Yeah.
Uh,
A little bit of levity, a little gaseous levity.
A header into a good comedic subgenre.
Yeah.
All right, Monroe. I think we're gonna say bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching if you got this
Thanks,
far.
everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe. Be healthy. I love y'all.
Stay distant. Stay in your house.
Yes.